What is up? I am Miguel Antonio, and this is the Live and Create podcast. It's where I interview artists and entrepreneurs about what it means to live a great life and create great things. On this episode, we have Rich Bracken. He's a keynote speaker, a podcaster, and an author. He's worked with companies like Vice, ESPN, ABC, and Bustle, just to name a few. We tackled topics ranging from empathy and storytelling all the way to how Hanson, the band Hanson, actually went from making songs like MMMbop to making beer and selling it out of their own microbrewery. He also ends us with this powerful idea that your story can become someone else's lifeline. It's a great conversation. Hope you guys enjoy.
The Live and Create podcast.
Let's go and dive in, man. All right, so you're a keynote speaker, doing virtual keynotes, obviously this year, hopefully getting back to in-person. Podcaster. At one point, I thought you actually worked for the TV station because you're on TV so much.
Right.
But so you do all these things, but we actually met while you were a DJ. And so you also have this history and really a love and passion that overflows a lot for music, but a history of being a DJ. So can you talk to me a little bit about that, like the DJ world and what's that look like for you?
Sure. Yeah. The music side of me and the business side of me intertwines quite a bit. And I use a lot of my DJ stories and my background in music and entertainment in my keynotes. And so it's a lot of fun to weave the two because I still to this day will always have a passion, and I for the rest of my life will have a passion for DJing and always for music. And so the short story about DJing was that I did it by accident when I was 15 because we were hiring what we deemed at the time was an old 40-year-old DJ to come to our mixers, and the guy was terrible. And so my best friend and I know, I'm like at 44, I'm like, I regret that statement. But at the time, my best friend and I owned a ton of CDs. And so we're like, I was on student council. I went, why don't you just hire Brett and I will do the dances. This guy's charging $500. We'll do it for $150.
Nice. Undercutting the competition, doing it.
And nobody was coming. We had 5 people at the last dance that we did not do. And we had like 300 at the first one that we did because, you want to go hear your friends DJ. It's a cool thing. And so I fell in love with it. And I've always been a music kid. Like growing up, my dad played music all the time, like rock and Motown. And so I grew up on it. But I always had an affinity for music. And so once that first, like that crowd interaction and that energy, even from a raucous high school crowd was it for me. And from that point forward, I found a way to carve out my own niche as a DJ. And in hindsight, I think it would have been really fun to dive in head first and make that my main career. But I always just kind of did it for fun and wound up in a lot of really phenomenal positions where I was opening for people like Kelly Rowland and Avicii and Roger Sanchez and Stonebridge and some really notable names. So it was always a passion of mine, I made money and got to travel and do some cool stuff and played in Vegas and played in Miami and did all these things. But now when I'm on stage doing keynotes or even in a virtual sense because of the TV stuff, now I understand the value of interacting with crowds and how to work a crowd and how to pick up on that energy, because I've also learned in my elder years, now that I'm past the 40-year-old DJ mark, that I am what they call a high sensitivity person. So, which is exactly what I felt when I was DJing. Like I could hear the music and feel everything, but I could feel the energy. Like the crowd had a color to me, and I would hear the music when I would pick out tracks. I would hear it in the bar and I would hear the structure of it or see the structure of it as I'm listening to it. So I heard it a different way, and it's always been a big passion of mine. So I weave those two in all the time. And I talk about how you can interact and engage with people and how music, I talk about music with emotional intelligence because, I listen to music nonstop, whether I'm working on a project or first thing in the morning. So music is a humongous part of my life and always will be.
Well, and it seems like a lot of great performers, that's the piece they have. I think of it as empathy on like a different scale. But yeah, it's interesting standing on stage. A lot of the artists I know, they can sense it. And I've seen it in speakers as well, where it's like they can sense how to change it. Like even speakers I've seen who has spoke night after night for different reasons. I got to see them speak. They knew the room was just a little different and they could adjust and really bring them along with them. So that's cool that you found a way to take that world and apply it now in the keynote world for you. And one thing I've noticed, and I think of you also as a fitness guy, I'm super into fitness and all that as well. So it's really inspiring. But I know your story comes with it wasn't always that way for you, right?
Right.
You were on a journey yourself of overcoming. Well, I'll let you tell it. Like your
Sure.
story of getting into fitness, and I think from my understanding of when we've talked and when I've read about it, it drove where you're at today as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so I started off as a rail thin kid when, up until about third grade, fourth grade, I was active and I was this skinny blonde kid that was just running all the time. Around fourth grade, my doctor diagnosed me with asthma. And so my parents, being an only child, my parents were like, sit down, don't do anything. You can't go outside. You know, this is going to trigger your asthma. And so I got into video games and fast food. Wound up putting on a lot of weight. I was the husky jeans kid in school. I got picked on a lot. I got bullied a lot because of my size. But it was just, I didn't know any better. My parents didn't know any better. Like I never blamed them for the reason for the way I looked, because back then we didn't have the nutritional knowledge and we don't have the education that we do now. And so I adopted that bigger mentality in the sense that I became a football player and I was an offensive lineman. And so I took a lot of value in protecting my friends. That's the offensive lineman's job, is to protect the quarterback, protect the offense. So that I took a lot of value in that. So that progressed, and I was 235 pounds when I graduated high school. And then I got up to 260 in college.
Okay.
And finally, when I quit playing football, I was like, I don't need to be this big anymore. And I didn't try to lose as much weight as I did. I wanted to get down to about 200 pounds. And then once I hit 200 and I started feeling really good, I had more energy. I felt better about myself. Everything was just different. I just felt a change coming on. And so I wound up losing 100 pounds and have kept it off now for 25 years. That's and so amazing. It was really adopting the lifestyle of change as opposed to people that, pop pills or take on a fad diet or something like that. Like I changed my entire knowledge about food and exercise, and exercise became a huge thing for me. And I went from being the powerlifting college football player to now, like, I'm not afraid to pick up 20-pound dumbbells or 10-pound dumbbells and use them in my workouts because I understand the value of high reps and low weight, because it helps me feel good and helps me look good to what I want to look like. So yeah, it's been an incredible journey, but it is a key message that I have, talking about goal achievement and doing things the right way and not cutting corners.
Yeah, I love that you bring up the idea of lifestyle change as well. Because I know in the past, as I've looked to get into either lifting or like there's a season of CrossFit. Now I do like endurance sports. I'm doing an Ironman, Ironman California, as long as everything goes as planned as far as the world opening back up. But the idea of these quick, diets, like 30 days to do this, and it just never seemed to work. And so for me, it was like, what are these slow changes that I can make to where it becomes a lifestyle behind it? And I feel like that's made a difference. And anyone that I've seen, that's a difference for them as well. Where how do I, like you said, 25 years later, here you are still living.
Well, it's the same thing in life too. I mean, you can want to change anything in your life that you want to change. And if you feel like it's going to happen overnight, or you make a plan for it to happen overnight, it's not going to stick. I mean, it's just not, because you have to change your mentality. You have to change the behavior. You have to change the outlook on things. And it's easier. So even now when I fall off the wagon, because I fall off the wagon every Sunday when the Chiefs are playing, because I just give myself permission to do that. But I know how to get back on.
That's almost part of it.
Right, exactly. It's good luck. I've helped the Chiefs get as far as they have in the last couple of years because of my eating habits on Sunday. You're welcome, Patrick.
And we are all grateful.
Hey, Kansas City, number one, you're welcome that I moved out of town 2 years ago. We've gone to back-to-back Super Bowls. So I understand that there's a billboard outside of Kansas City saying, do not let this guy come back into city limits with a moving truck. I get it. But, it really is all about understanding that you can get back to wherever you need to get back to, no matter how far you slide, because you've trained yourself to understand the path. But if you fall off the wagon and you're like, I got to go pick up another different kind of shake, or, what if your shake company goes out of business? What are you going to do then? So it's understanding that getting the habits and getting the lifestyle built gets you back to center when you slip that way.
Yeah. The swimming portion of the Ironmans, that's been a place where when I'm swimming laps, typically I'm saying to myself, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And going through, it's all these minute little changes you do in the water that make all the difference in the end. And it's like, I've been trying to think to myself, where do I apply it in my own life? What are those little habits that in the end will actually make a difference. I wish I could remember who said it. Maybe where it's like we often overestimate what we can do in one day and underestimate what we can accomplish in an entire year. And
I have actually never heard that, but I will attribute it to you now. So
right.
Every time I think about that mentality, I'm going to think about you. So
I stole it from somebody. I probably like 15 books that was quoted in, I imagine. But yeah, those incremental little changes, man. And I deal with that because I get so stressed out, too often. And it's like, I have to remember, it's like, hey, what's a little thing you can do today?
Right.
So the idea of storytelling, you are a professional storyteller. You are, traveling the world, and then also now, speaking to the whole world through that office right there.
Welcome to my storytelling kingdom right here.
Where does the passion of storytelling, where did it start for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it started when I really started diving into music, to be honest, to kind of bring the connection back. I've always loved the passion in storytelling, both lyrically and musically through music, because, in movies too, I'm a big movie junkie as well. And I think it was back when music started making sense to me. Like I remember distinctly buying the And Justice for All CD back in 7th grade. Nice. And that to me, I think actually now that I pinpoint it, I think that was the first time I understood storytelling and beauty and music from a creation standpoint. That's amazing. I mean, that album is angry, it's dark, but it's relatable in a lot of ways. And so when you go back and listen to that album throughout, there's a lot of stuff in there. It's action packed. And I think that's, I love Metallica for that reason, and many more, but that storytelling aspect, that operatic way of conveying a message and conveying a story is really powerful. And I feel now again, like I'm real timing this experience. So here we go. Like I remember the emotions it evoked in me, and I remember the stories that it told. And I was like, oh yeah, I can relate to that. Or, I don't understand exactly how he felt when he wrote this, but this is how it makes me feel and how it ties to my story. And I think every musician I've ever had a chance to talk with and have a conversation with says the same thing. Like, I'm telling my story, and it's so powerful to them when, I've talked to a couple of people that say, when you stand on a stage and you sing a song that you wrote from the heart and you see the crowd singing it back, and they've got as many tears in their eyes, or they've got that same euphoric look on their face, they've connected with that story. And I think that is so powerful. And I used to do that with my DJ sets. Like I would always say, you could tell what mood I'm in and what I'm trying to convey by my set. So the way awesome. I flowed things, right? And I was either like, it's great and it's bouncy, or we're going dark and it's going to be hard. And there's going to be some
angsty today.
There's going to be some heavy stuff in this set, man. But it really is it's that storytelling, and it's the ability to come in and just like tap on someone's heart or tap on someone's mind and say, hey, pay attention. Here's what you're going to find out of this. And I think that's where I love, like when I give keynotes, like nothing is more flattering to me and more valuable to me than to have somebody reach out after a presentation and say, hey, this resonated with me because. And it typically is not the same thing that it resonated with me on, maybe similar, but I love hearing their take on it, because we all have our subjective view on things. So
that's what's always so interesting for me, where I'll write a song about a particular thing and someone comes up to me and says, man, this helped me think about a situation with my dad. And I was like, I was talking about dogmatic, blah, 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 things that I thought were great. But it helped them in a particular way. That's the beauty, I think, of art and storytelling.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's the old saying that you could have 10 people look at the same painting and they're going to take something else away from it, or they're going to have 10 different people listen to the same song and they're all going to have like a unique piece of feedback on it, because you're all hearing something, you're all tying to the story differently. But it's the beauty of art, because it's ever changing and it's never the same.
Yeah, that's our band's the band that I was previously in. Our album, there was a song I was just fighting to cut. I wrote it. I had worked on it forever. We even were almost done recording the whole thing, and I was like, I don't like it. We should have put it on the album. And everyone else were like, no, you're going to put it on there. So I listened to him, and later on, and it ended up becoming one of our more popular tunes with fans. Oh, wow. And I'm like, to the point where I was like, I don't get it, but we'll keep playing it. but it connected with them in a fresh way. But
yeah, I don't even like me, but evidently everybody else does. So I guess
apparently everyone likes that song, but I didn't like it. But
I wonder if Hanson feels the same way.
I bet, especially because I think they still perform, but do like their indie stuff. But
they do.
There's no way
I think they own a brewery. Not to go down that rabbit hole, but I think they own like a beer or something like that. So
I would go drink a beer at the Hanson brewery.
I would gladly drink a Hanson beer. I don't care who sees this video. Like I would gladly have a Hanson beer.
I would do a spoken word interpretation of MMMbop while drinking a Hanson beer, and I'd let people film it.
I will find the Hanson beer, and I'm sending you Hanson beer, and you're on the hook to do a spoken word interpretation of said Hanson beer.
I cannot wait. I just
who knew we were going to go Hanson and beer on this conversation.
I hope that it's a stout. That's my only thing. But whatever it is, I'll even stomach an IPA, which I know that kills my hipster cred. No IPAs, but
you're taking one for for 90s pop culture. So
yeah,
you're excused.
Because it's so good. It's so good. I love that your inspiration of storytelling started with Metallica. That to me, it's such a fresh take.
And I love that I learned that fact like in real time with you right now. Like I've never thought about that. And now like I'm hearing that album in the back of my head now. And it's true. Like I remember sitting in my room listening to that album countless times. Man. And I remember all of it. And that was the first album that I really wanted to learn. I played bass too. And I wanted to learn all of Jason Newsted's bass lines in that album because I was like, this is amazing. And this is hitting me differently. And so, yeah, I mean, true confession. Like I had never actually said that out loud, nor had I realized that And Justice for All was my introduction to storytelling, but there you go.
When I think one of my big introductions to rock music, I first fell in love with rock music because of Nirvana. It was their Unplugged album. I was super into like gangster rap before that, but then that Unplugged album came out. I hated alternative music. I did. And then I heard the Meat Puppets cover, Man Who Sold the World.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa. And then after that, it was the Black album I stumbled upon in the rock world. And that was the one that, Metallica was a very formative band for me as well, especially that album. I even liked, this is unpopular, I even like Saint Anger. It's a trashy snare sound, but I even like the snare sound. I get why people don't.
But that's again, that goes back to the subjectivity of music. Like there are albums and there are bands that I like that I refuse to apologize for because I just like them. It ties to a memory or it ties to an experience and it ties to something or it's an excuse for me to just not give a damn and be goofy, like whatever that winds up being. But I agree because now I'm thinking about all the albums and there was actually, I think there was a playlist on Spotify that I came across. It was like 90s rock and I was going through there. I'm like, there's some amazing stuff, but it's funny now. So another true confession, I didn't like Nirvana at the time. I was like, they're okay, but I wasn't like, there's, Kurt Cobain's the best ever.
Right.
But in the last, I'd say 4 years, and I have no idea why, in the last 4 years, I have become obsessed with Nirvana. Like they again, just hits me differently now. That's cool. So the Unplugged album, never mind. But they're, and I'll get it live at Reading. Their and I think that's what really.
I haven't heard that one.
So it's a concert movie. You could find it on. I think I bought it on Apple. It's unbelievable, and because I was looking up, I get down the rabbit hole of like top 10 lists on music. Right. And it was voted as the most impactful concert performance of all time.
Wow.
And it's insane. Like, and it was one of those that I sat down one night and I had a glass of wine, sat and just watched the thing the whole way through. And I took on a new appreciation for every member of the band. Kurt's phenomenal. Awesome. And obviously he's legendary. But when you've got Chris Novoselic, who is a phenomenal bass player and just drives a really heavy riff and just is really, really good. But then Dave Grohl speaks for himself. So
yes.
But when you think about like
he exudes greatness even from then, there's just something special about that dude.
Yeah. But Alice in Chains, Pearl Jam, all those albums. I was a big, big Anthrax fan too. Anthrax.
I'll have to check them out because I never really got into that. And I know you like some super heavy stuff. Like, you're into like heavy things.
Yeah. I mean, my favorite band of all time is Seven Dust. Like I love them unequivocally. Like there is no close second to Seven Dust in my world. But yeah, I love Slipknot, and I love Motionless in White, and some of these really, these heavier bands. And, I had the privilege of actually hanging out and spending time with the guys in Slipknot when I lived in Des Moines for a few years.
Nice.
And again, I think that too was a really good insight into, you could take Slipknot at face value and be like, okay, they're crazy and they're scary and horrifying and all these things. But when I would be at Corey's house and sit down and talk with him and hear what he has to say about things, and understand that he's got a room full of books and movies that influence how he writes. And, and you get to know the person behind the performance. That to me is everything. That's why I love, I've always loved, what was it, the VH1 Behind the Music series?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I love
it. Was always amazing.
Again, thanks to Injustice for All, that I just realized, the behind the scenes told the story of an album or an artist, and it really shone in on those things. So any documentary, I'll watch any documentary that's about writing a song or an album or an artist. I think Song Exploder is the new one that's on Netflix. There's a great episode on 9 Inch Nails' Hurt.
Nice.
Phenomenal. And Trent breaks down the song, and the guy breaks down every element of it. Song Exploder is a phenomenal show. I hope
there's another Song Exploder, and then there's another one. A guy at my gym actually suggested. He always has great music taste. So about every 2 weeks, I ask him for a suggestion, what he's listening to. Oh God, where is it? Super professional podcasting here. But what they did is Dissect. Have you heard of this?
I haven't heard of that.
So Dissect, and it takes an album and goes track by track and talks about the history of the song, the lyrics.
Oh, wow.
For example, the one I listened through was they took Kendrick Lamar's album Damn, went track by track, and before they dove into the full album, they actually talked about his discography and its impact on culture leading up to the release of Damn, and then it just wove it all in. And man, it blew me away, because honestly, Damn is probably one of my favorite albums. Rap is a big thing. Probably where you start tilting more towards the heavy stuff. I start tilting towards more of the rap world.
I have to correct you there. So going back,
I assumed.
Here's some good. Here's another side of me. So the same day that I bought the Injustice for All album was the same day that I bought Easy Does It, and I was an Easy fan.
Okay.
Public Enemy is up there in my top 5. Public Enemy is one of my favorite groups.
So you had 2 tracks rolling. You're like Metallica.
So when my worlds collided, when Anthrax and Public Enemy did Bring the Noise, that was everything.
Do you remember that? You remember the movie Judgment Night?
Oh yeah,
back in that era.
That
soundtrack was
one of the most underrated soundtracks of all time. Yeah.
Biohazard and Cypress Hill,
Ice-T. What was the?
Good.
Helmet,
House of Pain. Yep.
Yes. Just Another Victim is one of my favorite workout tracks to this day. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Judgment, really? Hanson microbrews and Judgment Night soundtrack. That's where we went. That's why you're my boy. I love talking with you about this. But yeah, honestly, hip hop has been a huge part of my background too. Actually, I started as a hip hop DJ, and that was, and then I went into more of house music and things like that. But I've always loved soulful house. But Public Enemy is one of my favorite groups. X-Clan, actually got to interview Speech from Arrested Development on my podcast.
Nice. Oh my God, they were so good.
Yeah, I mean, it just amazing.
How was that interview? I'll just have to listen to it and check it out.
Phenomenal.
That's amazing.
Number one, hands down, one of the nicest guys I've ever talked to in my entire life. He's got a soul that just resonates even through a microphone. Obviously, with his music he does, but when he's talking to you, he's just so full of energy and positivity. He's a phenomenal guy. So the conversation was great in a lot of ways too, because I shared with him, and I actually got to, so funny story that every now and then, sorry if any police officers that are watching this, every now and then I'll record myself singing in my car. And so there was one day that I was doing Bring the Noise by Public Enemy, just the Public Enemy version of it. And I was just having a day that I just had to let out some energy coming out from work. And so I'm rolling down the highway going, bass, how low can you go? Death row. And I'm recording it and I posted it on Twitter. So then I get home and I check my phone later on, and my Twitter has just the notifications have just blown up. What in the world? Chuck D retweeted my video of me doing Bring the Noise.
Cheers to you. That's awesome.
And so then he started following me, and I'm like, I sent him a message. I'm like, dear Chuck, holy shit, but the cool thing is I got to tell him through DMs, and we exchanged a couple of messages, but I got to tell Speech as well, because he's in the same vein in this conversation, is that growing up in Johnson County, Kansas, we didn't have Black history. We didn't have Black education. We just didn't. It wasn't in our curriculum because it's a predominantly white school district. And so I got to tell Chuck and I got to tell Speech firsthand that their music helped educate me. X-Clan is another group that I listened to back then. They were very pro-Black and African history. And I got to learn through these artists. And I think that's another part of music that we forget. And now I think we've gotten a little bit away from that. There are some bands that are still of the conscious thread, or will have a conscious song here and there. But I think in the 90s, there was so much commentary within the music. I think that genre of music, or that decade of music, is so underrated, because you think about like the Spice Girls and Hanson,
Yeah, but man, rap was.
But some of those hardcore message groups were so prevalent in the 90s. So that's why I think.
Well, and there's artists like J. Cole, Kendrick Lamar, Royce da 5'9". Those are ones that I've gravitated to, and they have a lot of that what I would call conscious rap coming
Childish
into
Gambino's another one. Like,
my God.
Great.
Everything
great
he does.
Yeah.
Everything he
Genius.
does.
Seriously, I could watch the This Is America video another 100 times. Like, I think.
And apparently he didn't dance until making that video. I was like, I want to punch myself.
I tried those dance moves one time.
Yeah.
Thank God there was no camera rolling. It was awful. Like, I would love to be able to dance like that, like him and the kids in the video. But I was like, yeah, this is where I just kind of hang up my dancing shoes.
Yeah, it was brilliant. There's a guy I interviewed, I think the last interview last week, named Micah, and he said that Donald Glover is one of his, people he's looking at, like, I want to emulate this person. I was like, yeah, that's a good goal to go for, because it seems like everything he touches, other than, I'll be honest, didn't like his stand up a whole lot. It was still well done. I just didn't connect with it. It was a lot of nerd culture, and I don't know a lot of that world. So I was like, it's well crafted.
Because I have that nerd in me, that inner nerd. So I related to some of the things that he was talking about. I liked it. I thought he was talented, but I think his acting, like his pure group acting, and then his music obviously speaks for itself. But yeah, he's brilliant. And again, I think when you get like Kendrick Lamar and Chance and some of these others, they're so multi-talented. Right. Pharrell, I'd put in that same bucket too. He's beyond
off the charts and a great businessman.
Incredible.
Off the charts.
So I think there are those artists, but I think they're fewer and far between now than they were back then.
Yeah. No, I feel you. Now, when you talked about story and the power of story to impact people, obviously all these artists we discuss, you're up, week after week sharing these stories. Is there a story that sticks out to you where you saw impact from one of your meetings, or one of the things you shared, like something that you like look at it encourages you?
Yeah. And it happened. It was last summer, towards the end of the summer, like July, August. And I was doing a keynote on well-being and wellness. And I'm a big proponent of mental health and self-care, because I've had my own battles in my life. And so I heard somebody say something earlier on a podcast about your journey up the mountain, and sharing that journey could be somebody else's survival guide. And I truly believe that. So I think the more we talk about self-care and mental health awareness and our vulnerabilities too, like our blind spots and the things that impact us the most, I think the more conversations we have about that, and I've seen more since the pandemic than ever before, that really opens up a lot of really good conversations. So during this presentation on wellness and well-being, I shared a lot of my own personal struggle and my personal battles that I've gone through. And I said, hey, look, for anybody that's facing this kind of battle right now, just know that there is a way out. And it may not be evident now, because it wasn't always evident to me, but here I stand before you telling you exactly that there is a door. You just got to keep feeling around for it. And you got to keep trying, and you got to keep moving, because the minute you sit still in the darkness, that's when you succumb to it. But in that conversation and in sharing that information and being vulnerable like I was, I get done with my keynotes and I feel like I get done with a DJ set. Like I almost want to have somebody throw me a bottle of water and a towel when I get done. I'm like, you spend your energy. I'm like, oh, give me to the green room. And it's tough because, you pour all that out and you don't know, especially in the virtual environment, you don't have that immediate interaction.
Right.
So you don't know what happens. And there was an email that came through later on that evening that this woman reached out and she said, hey, I just want to thank you for what you did today, because I have been thinking about what you said and I have been battling my own demons in the last couple of months. And I just want to say thank you. And I'm going to keep looking for the door. And I'm like, I mean, I almost like sat back in my chair when I read it. I'm thinking, this is a woman that came into that presentation sitting in the darkness, letting it overcome her. And because of what I said and what I shared, I became that resolution for her. I became that hope for her. And truly, I have always felt that has been my calling, like to be able to help and to serve and to share and to mix vulnerability with comedy and humor and pop culture and make it fun and entertaining, because we all relate to that. But that's why I also, like with my podcast and with my keynotes, like I'm always talking about the struggle and the battle, because people can relate to that. You can come out and say like, oh, I'm just successful this and I do this and I've got all these things. People can't relate to that because it's not always achievable. And it's subjective too. Success is subjective. But we all relate to struggle. We all relate to battling. We all relate to trying to achieve something and what the work that goes into that is. We all relate, from a music standpoint and a content creation standpoint. We all face that battle of saying, oh, I don't know if anybody's going to like this. I mean, every
day,
every artist, everybody who's ever done something and said, "Here, world, judge me, please." Like we've all had that moment where like, oh God, is anybody gonna like this? I don't know. And then you either hit send or post, or you send out that demo, or you send out that song, and you're like, and then you hear something back, and you're like, oh, okay, it did make a difference.
Yeah, so that's powerful, man.
That's me as
your story. I think you said your story can be someone else's survival guide, and that's just a powerful thing. I know I've dealt with a lot of depression, anxiety. I know we've discussed that a little bit in the past over coffee, and it was always more of a quiet thing for me, a quiet struggle. And I had friends, a producer, challenge me like, you need to start sharing, and it made me nervous, where I feel way more comfortable with it now. But it was that same scenario similar scenario where the moment I started opening up about it, realizing one, there's so many people around me dealing with the same things. So many. But two, like you said, like maybe I'm just a little further down the road than somebody else, and that encourages them to keep going. Or maybe some of the people I talked to and share my story with were further down the road and had some other great insights to help me continue to move forward. But yeah, your story can become their survival guide. That's
exactly. And once you emerge, like as you think about either you're coming out of that or you've emerged and you're stronger because of it, for every one person that does that, there are 5 people that are walking into the darkness. So the more we talk about it, the more we circulate that hope, and the more we circulate that vulnerability and connectivity on that topic, the more people that walk into that darkness understand that there's a way out on the other side, and that they don't have to sit in there, number one, alone, or number two, for long if they don't want to. So it really is, it's powerful to keep talking. And for anybody that's listening, that's walking into that darkness, or that is sitting in that darkness, hey, there's a way out, and there's a way for you. And it's, and talk to people, find some people that you can trust and talk to, because it is more prevalent than you know, or than you think. And the more you talk about it, the more you're going to find people that are like, hey, look, I understand. They're going to empathize with you because they've been there too.
That's a great encouragement. It inspires me. Like my brain's already turning, like, how can you create a system where you remember to keep sharing about that? Cause I get on other things and other pushes and other, but I do remember there was a season where I was diving more deep into that. And honestly, that was the most feedback I had gotten from fans, even online. There's an artist named Secondhand King. Have you heard of him at all? I think he calls it like doo-wop rap. It's a very interesting style, and I think one of the most gifted artists coming out of Kansas City. But Secondhand Kings, but he did a show, I would say maybe 2 years ago. I think I was probably playing a show somewhere else, so I wasn't able to go. But he actually had his therapist come on stage with him, and they did
Oh,
an
wow.
interview. And I hope to eventually have him on. I'd love to talk about that experience. But I was like, man, that is a
That's awesome.
brilliant idea to help people see.
Genius.
And that was because for me, just going to a counselor, like I remember driving into like the parking lot and then driving away. And it took another year and a half to finally go through the door, you know, but if you can see that and display that for other people, like, no, you can find healing. You can find hope.
And I agree with you. Like I will say, and I've said it numerous times in presentations and podcasts and things like that, anybody, like I think that should be a requirement in life, is that you go to a counselor at least once, because it is the most powerful, and it needs to be destigmatized, and it's becoming more destigmatized. But going to a counselor, talking with somebody who's a trained professional and sharing how you're feeling is one of the most powerful things. I had a counselor, I went through a bad relationship where I was verbally abused, and it was shattering to me. And so when I exited the relationship, I was a hot mess. I was destroyed. I didn't know which way was up. And so going to a counselor, he helped me figure out what piece went with what, and helped me put myself back together in a stronger version of who I was and who I was intended to be. And I never shy away from that conversation. I'm like, yes, absolutely. Like, hey, I'll drive you to the counselor. I'll set you up with a couple ways. And especially now in the virtual environment, there have been more people getting into virtual counseling. So you can do it from the privacy of your own home, but please, like, give it a shot. If you've ever thought about going to a counselor, do it, and do it like this week, or set up something this week, because it's the most valuable thing you'll ever do.
Yeah. And I always equated it to, like, I take voice lessons. I took, guitar lessons. And after a while, it started feeling like, okay, I'm going to my life lessons, or my emotional lessons, or my mental lessons, whatever they are. But yeah, I remember going 2 different seasons, and incredibly helpful to my life. And there's times where even recently where I'm like, maybe that's something I need to do again, almost like a checkup. Like, hey, how do you figure out these next steps? And it doesn't even necessarily have to be like, for me, I was dealing with like OCD and anxiety and a lot of like heavy stuff, but maybe it's just like, I feel like I want to take a next step in my life. I know some people have done that, where they're like, I've reached some level of success, but I feel like maybe there's some roadblocks I'm not seeing. So they would go in for like 6 months and do that to help open up really the next iteration of whatever their business or personal life was. And such a powerful thing. Well, man, I love your approach in general to what you're doing. It seems to be this holistic piece where it's not just about success in business, not just success in health, but it's like this whole thing. And so I'm curious from you, this idea of living a great life. It kind of encompasses all of it. If you had to define it, what does living a great life look like to you?
I think living a great life to me today at 44 is so starkly different than it was at, say, 24 or 34. And I think now what I will say is that living a great life to me now is being true to who you are. And it won't sound the way it's coming out, but really doing what makes you happy and not worrying about other people. So not in a selfish way, but when it comes down to it, I've spent so much of my life trying to make other people happy, or doing things that I think would get approval from others. And I was so worried about it, either doing it and worrying about the approval, or not doing it because I was scared of the disapproval that I would get, or the rejection that I would get from it. And I would say now that I have found more happiness, more fulfillment, and more genuine energy in myself, even especially when I need it with late nights and early mornings, because I'm doing what means the most to me. And I think it starts there. And I love being a husband, I love being a father, but I have to take care of myself first. And I have to do the things that are making me happy to be the best person that I can be in the other areas of my life. And I think so when you can start with that core, no matter what else is going on in the spokes of all the other things you've got going on, that core happiness feeds into those. And you'll see yourself reflected in that way. And for a lot of people that are struggling with that, they struggle with communication, they struggle with family life, they struggle with work-life balance, they struggle with those things because they're not owning who they are and owning what makes them happy. Again, like I became so unapologetic. And with that, I started shedding that fear of rejection. And that was the most empowering thing in my entire life. So I think that in of itself, starting from there, finding the core happiness of what you truly want, what truly makes you happy, and not apologizing for it and being who you are. Because same thing, like I can sit here and talk about all the different weird music that I like, or the weird movies that I like, or why I'm oddly attracted to this kind of a band. And I can own that and be happy in that, and that's fine. And I guarantee you, if I talk about it enough, somebody else will understand that. And so we're not alone, because I think that's the biggest fear that we have, is that I'm gonna like something, or I'm gonna own my happiness, but nobody else is gonna be along that ride with me. Who cares? Like, you're making yourself happy, and starting from there is where everything else resonates outside of that circle. So focus on the things that you truly like, and write them down. Write down, like, I love my coffee a certain way, and I love certain kinds of music, and all those things. Like, write those things down, look at that list and own it.
That's a great idea.
From that point forward, your life will change dramatically.
So, man, I love that. It's a great idea too. Just writing down even those small little things. It's like, no, just embrace it. You know, they call them guilty pleasures especially in the music world, right? And there's times where I'm like, you know, why can't I talk about the fact that I like Vanessa Carlton? Because she's really good. Okay. And my
like and along those lines, and you'll appreciate this too. So I went through a CD purging phase a few months ago. I had my tubs of CDs that I just could not depart from. I had been collecting them during my DJ days, and like I just had this emotional connection to them. And so I'm flipping through, and there's a bunch that I'm like, I can get rid of that, get rid of that, get rid of that. And I was like, Natalie Merchant, I can't.
She framed it instead. You kept it
right, exactly. It's like the album cover. She's doing this. I'm like, Natalie, I can't throw you. You have to stay with me. I'm sorry. And my favorite singer of all time, Sade. Won't apologize for it. I don't care. I love every song that Sade has ever sang. I've seen her twice in concert. She winked at me once. It was one of the best moments of my life. Like, I don't care. I own that.
You're like, sometimes when I'm driving alone, I still think about that moment. It was just such a beautiful moment.
You have no idea how many times that moment. So I'm like, I'll have a bad day. And I'll be like, but Sade winked at me. Can you say that? I don't think so. Like, nope. I'm immediately like, bam.
That's awesome.
So thank you, Sade, for making my life.
I remember being 29, which was a few years ago, because I'm in the 40 club as well. And I'm a people pleaser naturally. It's just who I am. And that's been a whole life journey for myself. But the first time I was really confronted with this idea, I was at a conference, and there was a guy that I just started talking to. I love striking up conversations with different people, new people. And he said he was 30. And I was like, man, I'm 29. I'm kind of freaking out because I'm going to turn 30. And it seemed like so old to me at the time. Right. And I was like, how's it been? And he goes, it's actually been kind of cool. I was like, why? He said, for some reason, I just started caring less about what people thought. And I don't know why up to that point, I had never really gave that a whole lot of consideration. And really I think that next decade, maybe in part because of that conversation, sent me on that journey of exploring, like, where is people pleasing? Part of it was, honestly, recently, is just embracing that that's who I am, and it's okay. I just can't let it hinder myself. I can't, I can go deep into that, but essentially embracing even the fact that I am a people pleaser, but seeing where it can take me off track. But yeah, to really value yourself, it kind of opens the doors to love the people around you, I think, better. And
that's one of the main things I respect and love about you, man, is that the fact that you are very empathetic, and you are very much of a servant mentality and a pleasing mentality. But again, like I agree, like my 30th birthday set me on the course of setting me free. Like I remember being so clogged up with people pleasing up until that point, and I didn't disassociate myself with people pleasing, but I looked at it in a different way. Right. And it sounds like you've kind of done the same thing, where it's still important, but it's not the catalyst to everything else. Like, if I don't get acceptance, or I don't please people, or if I do something and it doesn't get the reaction that I want, I'm not wrecked about it.
It's like, I'll survive. Yeah,
exactly. I will.
I almost went hard. I shared in a previous podcast, but where I went hardcore the opposite direction. And frankly, for a few years, I think I became an asshole, and it wasn't necessarily good. And I think I left some carnage that hopefully some of it I've been able to, work out with different people. But I almost feel like even that was part of the phase where I had to go hard this way. And I was like, you know what? I don't have to be an asshole, but I do have to have strong boundaries. And, but then but then I did see like other relationships flourish through that. So that's a powerful thing, man. Thanks for sharing that. And
of course,
and creation, right? When you
Yep.
think of creating great things,
Mhm.
what does that mean to you?
You know, for a while, and again, tying music back to it. So for a while there, I thought it meant like doing something that would just blow everybody's mind. And especially like I've always been that kind of person, especially with music, that I wanted to be really good, really quick. And so like I played guitar for 3 months when I was in middle school, and I played drums for like 2 weeks when I was 10, because I didn't want to put the practice in. And I will starkly remember there was a global producer, one of the top names in house music production, that I played with him one time, and he, you know, we stayed in touch, and I said something about wanting to write music. And he said, well, if you ever write anything, send it to me, and I would love to put it on my show, use it in my set.
Awesome.
You know? And I went into that place of like, oh my gosh, like this guy's a legend. I've got to do something that is perfect and immaculate, and that will be, you know, the best premiere track that any dance producer's ever put out. And I didn't do a damn thing about it. I never did it. I started it, and it was awful, and I could never get out of my way because I wasn't being true to who I was. I was trying to make something that I thought everybody else would like, and I didn't do what I felt was right.
Man.
And so I think when it comes to creation, whether that's art, music, writing, anything, own what you're doing. Because again, kind of going back to the music, comparisons and things like that, it will resonate with somebody. Same thing with my presentations, like I talked about earlier. Like I own what I say. I own the stories within it. I own the message that I want to convey. I'm not worried about what's right or what I think will be popular. I do what I think is the correct thing to say and the correct message to convey and the correct hope to give. And if it resonates, great. If it doesn't, then, I can walk away saying, I did what I thought was the pure thing to do. And I can take solace in that. And we all have off days. Not every band has ever had a stellar, flawless performance. There's always been that. I've had many a snafu in my DJ days. So it's always there. Imperfection is always laying in the grass, waiting for you to think you're perfect. And so owning what you know, owning what you believe, owning what is true to you is the source of all happiness with creation. And yes, you're going to create garbage. Like we all are. We all are going to put out a horrible song or paint a painting that is just absolutely atrocious. And I've written articles and I've done podcasts. And I'm like, this is terrible. And don't even get me started on my singing. Like I'm so hit or miss when it comes to singing. Like there are times where I would, again, going back to my recording in the car, I would record it thinking like, oh, I sound great. And I play it back. I'm like, what in the cat?
And next thing you know, Chuck D is, retweeting it.
Chuck D is like, unfollow, right?
Can I re-record that, man? I'm sorry.
Like, hey, if I go to Chuck's profile, he's like, I unfollowed you because you tried to sing something that was way out of your range. And that's really embarrassing. And I can't have that on my street cred. Like, sorry. So, but again, like if you own the happiness in it, awesome. And you own the pure part of your heart that is putting it into the creation, everything takes care of itself from there.
That's huge, man. I love it. That's great, man. Well, thank you for making the time, and thanks for sharing these stories. And yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, man. It's always good to talk to you, good to connect with you, but I really appreciate you letting me come on the show and share my stories. And again, like all the different weird angles that we took on this, but hey, it is what it is. I own it all, man.
And you let me know if you find that Hanson brewery, because that would be brilliant video.
When we get done with this, I'm Googling where that is. I will find that and I will get that to you. I promise you. If it doesn't exist, I will buy a beer and I will put a label on it that has Hanson's picture on it just to prove a point.
I need to start studying up the lyrics so I can do the spoken word interpretation.
Oh, don't act like you don't know the lyrics. Don't do that. own your knowledge of Hanson lyrics and don't be ashamed of it.
That's awesome. Thank you for listening to the Live and Create podcast. If you like what you heard, make sure you subscribe and leave a comment or a review.
The Live and Create podcast.